Welcome back to the Jim Rathmann Show. I'm your host, Jim Rathmann, where we talk about true crime. A quick shout out to my partners, Podgo, and also Hi Hello Labs for their partnership. We're going to talk about the Melanie Curtain case. Let's get into it. So in part one and part two, I'll just give you a recap of both. We talk about the Melanie Curtain case. We talk about how that case, how Melanie became involved, which was from the disgraced deputy, high-ranking deputy, Danny Perkins, and his wife at the time, Cynthia Perkins, in 2019. Both of them will not see the light of day anytime soon. Danny pled out to well over 100 years, involving multiple cases of crimes against children. His wife, Cynthia, same thing. She's got 40 years. She was going to testify against Danny, but he took his plea deal. But then there's the unfortunate, in my opinion, somebody that was completely and wrongfully accused. Melanie Curtain got caught up in something that had absolutely nothing at all to do with Danny and Cynthia Perkins. She was unfortunately smeared all over national news from the moment she was arrested in 2020 up until current. They linked her to being a part of the Danny Perkins, Cynthia Perkins story involving children. However, her video and what happened with her had absolutely nothing, and I mean nothing, to do with children. Nothing at all. And hers had to do back 5 years prior to anyone even having knowledge of Danny and Cynthia Perkins. She went to trial. A lot of the exculpatory evidence was not allowed in. That would have helped her in her case. It was kept out on purpose. A complete narrative was formed to persuade everybody as if this, crime had taken place to such a egregious nature, and that's not the case whatsoever. We've gone into what the appeals court had stated, which, again, was not allowing this evidence in, which I'm going to talk about here in part 3, what that evidence was that was not allowed in on Melanie's behalf. We're going to talk about what the Attorney General's office should have known, what they did not disclose, what the juror members didn't know, and that comes from a juror themselves within the Melanie Curtain trial. So without further ado, let's get into it. One of the big questions I'm sure you guys have: what was that exculpatory evidence? What was that evidence that was not allowed to be seen that could have helped Melanie in her case? Well, I've talked about the internet search history multiple times to kind of let you guys know a little bit into that. So what was inside that internet search history? Danny, in his search history, fantasized about women being unconscious or even dead, role-playing that. It was some sort of deviant behavior that he had, and he role-played in that. And, and his second wife helped participate in that fantasy for him. And it's important. It would have been important for the juror members to know this, because this 17-minute video that's got Melanie Curtain locked up for life specifically had to do with, at the time, his wife, and what I'm referring to as the victim, role-playing that fantasy. She was role-playing that fantasy. Why? Because there are hundreds of other photos and videos where she is role-playing that for him prior to Melanie Curtin's involvement and well after Melanie Curtin's involvement. They have videos of them. Sexual intercourse. She's got a shirt over her head, a pillow over her head, blanket over her head, playing completely unconscious, time and time and time again. There are other women within the evidence that was uncovered throughout their search warrants where it shows other women playing the exact same way. Some of them were maybe even drugged. Some of them were talked to and identified who wanted nothing to do with this case, mainly because of embarrassment and because the involvement that Danny and Cynthia Perkins had for children. And so they didn't want to be associated with it. It's it's an embarrassment to walk around your community being even associated with that, even though they had absolutely nothing to do with the sick, perverted, twisted, disgusting acts that Danny and Cynthia Perkins engaged in. But wouldn't you think, as a member of a jury, if you have somebody that your decision on whether they're guilty or not guilty for a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole, wouldn't you want to know all the facts surrounding that before you make a determination to put a mother of 2 children in prison for life? Yet, this information was not given to the jury members. They didn't know that Denny's fetish and search history involves so much around everything from necrophilia to unconscious role playing, just various things of that nature. They weren't made aware of that. They weren't privileged to the fact that the victim themselves, wife number 2, right, the one involved in this threesome with Melanie Curtain, role played it so many times for her husband at the time. But yet, that apparently wasn't relevant to the case. Remember I told you too that they went ahead and had no problem releasing videos of Danny and Melanie Curtain, whether it's at a department store, changing room, or at a car wash, right? The only thing Melanie Curtain was guilty of is being involved with somebody she probably wishes she never even met at this point. That's the only thing that she's guilty of. The fact that that wasn't a problem for the Attorney General's office to throw that out there, which, oh, by the way, according to juror number 3, absolutely persuaded a lot of the decisions of other jurors in there, right? To portray somebody in such a poor light to where she's going around having these affairs, right? Going to different locations, voyeurism, having sex in department store changing rooms or car wash. That was okay. That was acceptable for the juror to see. But not the history of Danny Perkins and his, at the time, said wife back then in 2014 and plus or minus a year or two within that. That would have been something the jury probably should have known or wanted to know. It wasn't like the defense didn't ask for it. It's not like the defense didn't try to get that to become evidence as exculpatory evidence and evidence on behalf of Melanie. No. We're going to exclude all that. We're going to exclude all that and strictly do a smear campaign, but we're going to put somebody up on the stand that's going to testify to that they never engaged in this kind of activity before. They've never, ever gone out of their way and done something where you're considered a swinger or group sex or couple swapping or anything of that nature. Yet it was determined in her own sworn affidavit that is the kind of lifestyle she engaged with her ex-husband prior to even meeting or having a relationship with Danny Perkins. It's mind-blowing to me. So let's take it a step further. We now know, and this is going to come out in trial, in this upcoming trial, the oral lesson that this victim that would never, ever go and do something like this. And for those of you that didn't miss this in part 2, let me recap this for you. The oral lesson that I'm talking about was a get-together at the residence of Danny Perkins and his wife at the time, the victim, where they had people over. She has Danny Perkins in a room. Then the victim here, or the wife, is providing oral sex to her husband. It doesn't sound strange. I get it. It doesn't. Except that her friend came in the room. And her friend walks over and gets down on a knee and tells the wife, "You're doing this all wrong. Let me show you how to do this right." And she, then, the friend, starts performing oral sex on Danny Perkins. It is said and believed that they both participated in providing this kind of oral sex act to Danny Perkins. Before the wife said, you know what? I feel uncomfortable now. I'm going to get up and leave the room. She didn't make her friend leave the room. She let her friend finish him off. She left the room. Her friend finished the act. But again, this is somebody on the stand, right, that's never done anything like this at all. But yet, that's what she did with her friend. That is what is out there. That is what is in the interview. Oral lesson. So, now, Melanie Curtain is getting ready for her trial that is coming up. I believe they start doing jury selections on November 17th of 2025. So that's, within the next couple of weeks here. What has gone on in that time frame? Now that all this treasure trove of information is known, because this said and quote unquote victim is not a victim. The real victim in this entire ordeal is actually Melanie Curtain. Melanie Curtain is the one that went to the hospital the day after this threesome happened in November of 2014. It is Melanie Curtain that claimed to have had all these signs and symptoms that brought her to the emergency room the morning after this happened. It is Melanie Curtain that 5 years later, 6 years later, her information pops up only after the executed search warrant on Denny and Cynthia Perkins' residence. It is only then that they find this treasure trove and thousands upon thousands of videos and photography of all these victims role-playing with his wife at the time. And yes, I understand that. A husband and wife have a right to some sort of privacy. I get it. But how much privacy do you really have when somebody's life is on the line as a mandatory life sentence without the chance whatsoever of parole? Yet, the other person involved in this crime, Danny Perkins, it doesn't even have to plea to this charge against his ex-wife, wife number 2. But Melanie Curtain has to face it. It is Melanie Curtain that is the victim here, completely. And now she has a legitimate chance at a trial. It's the same exact judge. Judge Brian Abels is going to be the one that is going to preside over this case for the second time. And it is my belief that what is right will happen this time through, because now that the appeals court has flat out ruled on this case and had the whole entire case tossed based on evidence that was not allowed in, that would have given Melanie Curtain a fair shot at her trial and was exculpatory, that could have removed her from this situation. So what has happened since building up to this? Well, there's been multiple back and forth with the judge and the courts. The Attorney General's office, they filed that they want a closed room when the victim testifies. Now, it doesn't seem to be too odd. However, you have a right to face your accusers. In this particular case, Melanie Curtain absolutely has the right to face this quote-unquote victim, wife number 2 of Danny Perkins. Okay? This victim now needs to go on the stand and be challenged to her integrity of her previous statements under oath on stand during a trial where life was the sentence. Life in prison was the mandatory sentence. Now she's going to have to answer to that. She's going to have to answer to the oral lesson. She's going to have to answer to the previous affidavit. But yet the state attorney general's office wants the room to be closed, completely closed off while she testifies. So that actually hasn't been ruled on yet. Okay, I would imagine that Melanie Curtin's attorneys would go ahead and file something going against that, because again, Melanie Curtin has the right to face the accusers. And in this particular case, it is the statement and the testimony of this victim, right, the wife number 2, that actually, a lot of that information is what put Melanie Curtain in prison for life. But that is what's going on right now. Also, what's going on in that case, Melanie's videos. Remember the videos I told you about where she would go into where she had sex with Denny in a department store? I believe she provided oral sex to him in a changing room. That is not allowed into evidence this time. Her having sex with Denny in a car wash. That is not allowed in this time. Why? For the same reason I already mentioned. It's a smear campaign. So that will not be allowed in at this trial that's coming up. So those two things, good. That's something that finally rules in Melanie's favor. Also, the Attorney General's office, they want to keep the sex life of this said victim, wife number 2, and Danny Perkins. They want to be able to keep that private. But you be the judge of that. Don't you think it's pretty important to know the role playing that they were doing back then, the scenarios, the fantasies, the hundreds upon hundreds of photos and videos of their sexual acts where they're role playing the exact same thing that happened to Melanie Curtain while having this threesome on November 8th of 2014. It would be critical to know that what you're seeing in that video, what is being showed in that video to 12 jurors that have the ability to put somebody away for life, ought to know that this was the same role-playing fantasy that has been done time and time again, not just with the ex-wife, the victim, but with other people even progressing forward all the way to his most recent marriage with Cynthia Perkins. I find that to be incredibly relevant. You be the judge of that. I'm just saying. And you know what the defense is going to be? It's going to be the same exact, or the Attorney General's office is going to be the same exact thing that they did in the first case, which they're going to use the rape shield. And yes, I agree with the rape shield when it is applicable. But I believe they're using the rape shield right now as a crutch to prevent any type of exculpatory evidence in, just to steer a narrative the way they want it to be to get their conviction. Remember, they had already put out all this information about Melanie Curtain. They put out, at first it started out in the media as there is a third person involved with Denny and Cynthia Perkins. Then Melanie Curtain gets arrested off of a cruise ship. Somehow the media is there. How did the media know that she was on a cruise ship? How was the media present when they went ahead and did the arrest of her then? They wanted the spotlight. They wanted the attention, and they dragged her completely through the mud. And every headline you would read, you can research it now on the internet. It is all over the place. Melanie Curtain is the third person involved with Denny and Cynthia Perkins for these disgusting, disgusting charges against children. They immediately linked her to the cake batter incident. For those of you that don't remember the cake batter incident, yes, Danny Perkins ejaculated into cake batter, where his wife Cynthia Perkins then made that same cake batter into cupcakes and brought them to school, where she fed them to the students, took pictures of it, and her and Danny Perkins thought it was hilarious. How absolutely disgusting. Monster-like. That is awful. And I do view both of them as monsters. But now the public thinks that is actually Melanie Curtain involved with that. The amount of death threats she has received, her family has received, windows broken out of her home, kids harassed constantly at school. Everywhere she went, she was forbidden to go to places. She couldn't be involved with a lot of stuff. She missed out on multiple years of her kid's life. On what? On a threesome? On a role-playing fantasy that was completely excluded from the jurors to be able to see? It is the juror number 3 in her first trial has come out and said these things. I'm not just making this up. This juror number 3 feels bamboozled. Can't speak for the other juror members, but this most certainly would have changed the circumstances and had changed the game the first time through. But information was purposefully withheld. In my opinion, they could have They could have allowed some of the stuff in, but they used that rape shield as a way to weaponize it to stop any exculpatory evidence of Melanie to get in. And I find that to be completely wrong. If you want a fair and impartial trial, it needs to be just that. You have a right to a defense. You have a right to challenge your accusers. And in this particular case, her hands were tied. But guess what? Second trial is coming up now. Now that evidence is going to be allowed in. That search history, that's going to be allowed in. The private life, it's going to be allowed in. All those things that I've talked about that were excluded before, the hundreds upon hundreds of role-playing incidents, the hundreds upon hundreds of photos and videos involving wife number 2, all that's going to be allowed into evidence. Good luck explaining to the public how a woman got life behind, life without the chance of parole based on continuous lies on stand in a court case such as that. And this was your friend. And this particular victim is a mother as well. How do you do that to somebody that was one time your friend? How do you do that to a mother that has 2 kids? How? How does the Attorney General's office prosecute a case like that, knowing the circumstances related to it, and steer a narrative a certain way? I think the Attorney General's office is going to have quite the challenge here on their hands when this said victim has to testify. Whether it's closed court, open to the media, it doesn't matter. The information will get out. The transcripts will get out. How on earth, when you now know that your star witness to this has lied, has perjured themselves, oral lesson, affidavit of this lifestyle before, all the role playing, all those things, because that's all coming out now. Hopefully, and it is my hope and my wish that this trial is fair and Melanie Curtain gets her fair shot at freedom, because I get it. If I read all the headlines, and I did read the headlines when this first came about 5 years ago, and I thought for sure she must be connected until I decided to look into the facts. And I hope all of you independently look into the facts as well, because a mother with 2 kids now has been locked up, got free, and now faces life in prison again, for a crime she has adamantly said she had nothing to do with. And now you know your said victim and star witness perjured themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to seriously take a dive into this. Do some searching on Google or whatever your search engine is and look at some of the facts of this case. You be the judge if you think Melanie Curtain got a fair trial. In my opinion, I think the Attorney General's office threw whatever they could at the wall to see what would stick. And at the time that this trial took place the first time, it would have been a whole lot easier to go to Danny Perkins or Cynthia Perkins and say, hey, you better start talking or coming up with a plea or whatever the case might be, because guess what? The third person to this just got life in prison. They just got life in prison. What do you think is going to happen to you? I've taken the time to review the facts in this case. And like I said, when I first heard about this, one, I was completely shocked and disgusted with Danny Perkins when it was just Danny and Cynthia. I couldn't believe that somebody that I trusted my own life with on the street, doing high-risk felony stuff, search warrants, arrest warrants, a person I watched over me doing undercover narcotic stuff. I couldn't believe that is somebody I worked with, that I've had inside my own home before, that I was friends with. I never, ever saw it. I always thought he's a young guy, good-looking guy, in shape at the time. He was what, late 20s, early 30s when he and I worked together? I've been around football players my whole life. It's not uncommon for athletes to have a lot of girlfriends or have a lot of sex with women. I just thought he was doing his thing. I had no idea, none whatsoever. And it's not just me that can say that. I know I can speak for many, many law enforcement professionals that work so incredibly hard at their jobs every day. We had no clue, because if we had a clue, we would have arrested him ourselves. I can guarantee, I can speak for that on so many, especially in Livingston Parish. I feel for those deputies. I feel for the sheriff because they have come under so much scrutiny because one of their own had committed such horrendous crimes against others. But I assure you, if they had the burden of proof, if they had the facts, they would have made that arrest a long time ago. We wouldn't be where we're at today. I guarantee it. But that's not what happened. And I encourage you to take the time to look into the facts of this particular case. My opinion, Melanie Curtain walks free. I think she walks free with this trial, if it even makes it to trial. Because if I was prosecuting this case, I don't know how comfortable I would be putting my star witness on the stand again, knowing now that their history, their actual history is out there for everybody to see. It wasn't covered up this time. It's not hidden this time. It's not in complete, stuff it in the corner and see what happens. This person has to now testify. And they're going to have to answer a lot of questions about what had happened before and why they lied. Why is it that you told everybody you never engaged in this before, but you did? You knew it. That to me is shameful. And I think the Attorney General's office is going to have a very, very tough and uphill battle to fight to try to get Melanie Curtain this time, because people supported and rallied around Melanie Curtain and what the facts were to this case. And I think she's a free woman in a few weeks from now. And I think this will all be completely behind her. And justice will finally have seen it's like the court system will have finally done what it's supposed to be able to do. A fair and impartial trial. You get a verdict that is, true to its core. But if you want that verdict, if you want the facts, you have to provide all the information. It did not happen in the first case, and I most certainly hope it happens here in the second case. So you be the judge. I will be back. I will follow up on this case here in a few weeks when I know what happens. And when that happens, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell every single thing that I have about that case. I will come back to you and we will take a dive into all of it. And who knows, maybe I'll have some special guests on here that can talk into more detail about that case when it's all said and done. But stay tuned. And until then, we'll be back on this topic. It's not over yet. It is not over yet. I appreciate you for listening. Give me a follow, The Real Jim Rathmann on Instagram. Shout out to my partners, Podgo and Hi Hello Labs. You guys stay tuned and we'll catch you at the next episode. Thank you.